that when Rabbi Ezra said that you need two lechis, do we need two lechis and a koira, or just two lechis are enough? So we brought a proof. Ma'aser Rabbi Ezra shalach etz Rabbi Yossi ben Freda Talmido laOivlin. They went to a certain town, Oivlin. Umetzor sheyoshev b'mavi she'ein lo el lechi echad. He was sitting in a mavli that only had one lechi. Amar lo bni asel el lechi echad. You got to make a second lechi. L'shitaso, you need two lechis. Amar lo v'chi l'sod mani tzarich. Do I have to close up this whole side? Amar lo yisosem umabikach. Yes, you should close it up. Amar Shimon Gamliel lo nechleku beisham beis Hillel al mavi shu pachos ma'arba amoy she'ein tzarich klum. Beisham beis Hillel both agree that a mavi that is narrower, the opening is narrower than 4 ames, doesn't need anything. Now that's not like any of the shittas we've learned so far. We learned that they may not argue that they both would require a lechi or a korah. That's what we learned before. So this Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is a new shita. They argue between 4 ames and 10 ames. You need both. That's the baraisa. So Ketani Mias, whatever you want to say about this baraisa, it said he says, why do I have to put two lechis? Do I have to close it all up? Now, if the sheet of Rabbi Ezra was 2 lechis and a crossbeam on top, so then it makes sense why he considered it to be sosum, closed, because you had a tzuras HaPesach. If you have a crossbeam and 2 lechis, you have a tzuras HaPesach, so that's like a complete wall. But if you're talking about 2 lechis on either side of the wall, then that doesn't close it up. So the Gemara says that's not a proof to what we wanted to ask. He said, do I have to close it up with 2 lechis? But there's no raya necessarily that means it needs the 2 lechis need a koira on top. Amar Shimon Gamliel. So one of the we're sort of circling back. Sometimes we say gufa when we say we mention something in passing, but that's sometimes not necessarily a baraisa comment. It might be a comment of an amoira. Here we're quoting one of the people who we quoted in the baraisa, and we want to go into it in detail. So we'll say Omar Mar. So just take a look next time. See the difference between Omar Mar. It usually quotes a Tanaitic piece of literature, like a baraisa or a Mishnah, and we're going into it in detail. Because that's what we're doing now. We're circling back. This is not a kasha. This is not nothing. This is just, you mentioned that thing about Rav Shimon Gamliel. Let's go into a little bit more detail. But we didn't use the structural word gufa. But many times we'll say gufa, let's go back and go into something in detail. But you'll see it may be a non-baraisa or a non-mishnah. It might be just a statement, an Amoraic statement, like Amar Vir Amar Shmuel or something. But anyways, we should take a look the next time we see gufa, what we're circling back on. That Beisham Beisil are not arguing if the entrance to the Mavu is less than Arba Amos. That doesn't need anything, not a lechi, not a koy. But our Mishnah is not like that. Mishur Rabbi Shmuel Omar, Tami Nechel, if they Rabbi Akiva, Lo Nechleku Beisham Beisil al Mavu Shupachos Marba Amos, Shehu Niter Obalechi Obakoira. Yeah, there was no argument between Beisham and Beisil, but their lack of argument was that they both agreed that it needs either a lechi or a korah. It's only between 4 and 10 that Beis Hillel said a lechi or korah, and Beis Shammai says 2 l'chaim. But less than arba, they agreed. But comes Rav Shimon Gamliel and said, you don't need anything. Now, the question is, why? So what? Rav Shimon Gamliel is a Tan. He's allowed to have his own opinion. But anyways, Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi, remember, it's not just coincidence that Rav Ashi is the final editor of Talmud Bavli, Ravina Rav Ashi, 200 later in the last generation of the Amoraim. So he didn't like this thing that Rabbi Gamliel had this new shita. So after hundreds of years, this was floating around in the yeshivas. Rav Ashi solved it. On Rav Ashi hachi kamar. This is what's meant there. Eino tzarich lechi v'korei k'bei Shammai. What that means, they agree. Ein chanami. Rav Shimon Gamliel is not arguing with our fundamental halacha that a mavui less than arba amos needs either a lechi or a koira. That means eino tzarich lechi v'korei k'bei Shammai. Beis Shammai agrees that it doesn't need a full lechi and a koira like he does between 4 and 10. And v'lo l'chaim Rabbi Eliezer, and it doesn't need 2 lechis like Rabbi Eliezer. Ella o lochi o karka beis Hillel. So there's really no machlokas between Rav Shimon Gamliel and the rest of our Tannaim. The Kama. So so when do you not need any correction? When do you not need any lechi or kor? On Rav Achli v'tei Rav Yichel ad arba 4 tfachim. That means if you have a very narrow opening to a mavui, think about when you're walking around Yerushalayim in the old city, particularly, and you come to the opening of a little street might be very narrow, but then it opens up very broadly. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the opening of this mavui is dalit tfachim. That it opens up so that to a wider area where different chatzeros and batim can open up into that mavui. Amrav Sheish Amrav Yirmiyah Barav Amarav. Moedim Chacham Rabbi Eliezer b'pasei chotzer. That if you have a chotzer that's opening up into an area that you're not. Normally, a chutzner has 4 walls. They have openings too. They might have an opening of 10 ames. They have windows. Normally, you can carry in a chutzner on Shabbos. Chutzers are just a yachid. However, if a chutzner opens up into an area that you can't carry, let's say it opens up to a Carmelist. Let's say it opens up to a Rosh Hashanah, the chutzner. So you can't carry stam hazoy in the chutzner unless you've corrected the opening of the chutzner. Similarly, to correcting an opening of a mavui that opens up into Rosh Hashanah. And the correction is different. It's not a lechi and or a korah. That you need boards on either side of the opening. So they agree to Rabbi Eliezer, just like Rabbi Eliezer requires 2 lechayayim by a mavui, the Chachamim agree by a chotzer. Rav Nachman Omer, halacha Rabbi Eliezer b'pasei chotzer, and then the halacha is like that you need 2 boards, 1 on either side. They have to be at least 4 tfachim. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, man moedim Rebbe. Who's the moedim? It's Rebbe. Halacha michlad depligi. And if you're quoting that halacha Rabbi Eliezer, it means there's a machlokes, and therefore man palig alei. Who's the bar plukta here? Rabbanon. So where is this machlokes Rebbe and the Chacham? The Tanya. Chatzar niteres b'pas echad. According to the Chachamim, a chatzar that's opening up into a area that normally you can't carry, you'd only be able to carry in that chatzar if you put 1 board at the opening. Rebbe Yomer b'shnei pasin. Rebbe holds that you need 2 boards. So when it says moedim chacham Rabbi Eliezer, it means Rebbe was moeded to him. Rav Asi Rav Yochanan, chotzer tricha shnei pasim, and you need 2 pasim, 1 on either side. Rav Zei Rav Asi, mi Rav Yochanan achi. Does Rav Yochanan really say this? V'ha'at hu da'amrit mishrei Rav Yochanan pasei chotzer trichim shei ben arba. That these boards have to be at least 4 tfachim. And therefore, since Rav Yochanan has just stated that you need 2 pasim, 1 on either side, and you've now stated that the minimum she has to be 4 tfachim, but we learned previously, Rav Ada in front of Rav Chanina, the army law kamed Rav Chanina bar Papi. Remember, we had the case previously of Chatzar Ketana that's opened up into Chatzar Gedola. 10, right? This opening was 10, the other opening was 11, or it was 11 wide. Ketana be'esrei, gdola b'achadesrei. Remember, so it's one amma extra. So if it was even, if the Chatzar Ketana was opening up directly to the middle, you'd have 3 tfachim on one side, 3 tfachim on the other side. Or if it was sort of irregular, wasn't right in the center, was moved over to one side, you'd have 4 tfachim on one side. 4 tfachim on one side, 2 tfachim on the other side. How am I doing that, gentlemen? Because one amma is 6 tfachim. So if it's equidistant, it'll be 3 and 3. If it's not equidistant, it'll be 4 and 2. So just keep that in mind. So Kisa, like Rav Zera miyame Persha, and when Rabbi Zera explained when he came from the Yam, Beruach Achas Ba'arba, that a chotzer will be corrected if on one side it only has 4, and Mishtei Ruchas, it doesn't need any Mashu Lakan or Mashu Lakan. And therefore the chotzer Ketana that sticks in even in equidistant, it's only 3 and 3, it still works. Because all you need is Mashu v'Mashu. But we haven't gotten to the Kashi yet. V'hadetani Abba bar Avdimi Rebbehi. This is Rebbe v'Servalak Rabbi Yossi. That you need a lechi at least 3 tfach, not a Mashu. And Rav Yochanan holds like Rabbanon, that you need 4 tfachim, and you need both sides, and it won't work with the small chutz. You only have 3 and 3, and based on Rav Yochanan's, the way we're just learning is you need 4 and 4. So Amr Yosef, Amr Yudah, Amr Shmuel, Chotzer needs pas echad. Shmuel says the Chotzer only needs 1 pas. You don't need 2 sides. Amr Lebal Rav Yosef. Amr Shmuel Hachi. Did Shmuel say that? Amr Le Shmuel Rav Chanani bar Shilo. At Le Ta'avid Uvda. Elo oy beroiv doifen oy b'shnei pasim. It means if you have, let's say, an opening of 7 tfachim and you have a board of 4, so it's more than 50% of that opening. Or b'shnei pasim, or so you can have 1 board on one side as long as it fills up the majority of the opening of the entrance, or you could have it on both sides. Omer leva analo yadana de uv dahav bedur de rabta, but we know about the case in Dur de Ravta, where there was a Lashon Yam Anichnas L'Chatz Ravi. It was a tongue of water from an ocean that was going into a 3-walled Chatzer, and even the 4th wall was a little bit there, and this was going into the opening. So a Yam, you can't carry in a Yam, it's a carmelis. So we just said, if you have a Chatzer that's opening up into an area that you can't carry, you need to correct it. To correct it, he only required 1 side, 1 board. So that's a rye against what you said, that you needed roiv doifen or 2 boards. Omar Le, he answered, L'shon Yam ka'armik, you're asking me a kasha from water? This is another example of leniencies regarding carrying that the Chum allowed you. If you're schlepping water, they made a lot of leniencies. The famous one is let's say you had a body of water and you have a window overlooking it. So you can create outside of your window like a box of 4x4 tfachim, and it's suspended over the water. Even though it's very high up, you could drop a pail through that box of 4x4 with an opening on the bottom, and go all the way to the water and pull up. And we drop those walls to the water, like we created Rishus HaYachid. So we are now transferring water from a Rishus HaYachid to our Rishus HaYachid, not from a Carmelist to Rishus HaYachid, because you wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. The only reason they allowed it is because they were Mekel Bayam. Omerle in. Mechitza Tluya Materes El B'mayim, because Kalu Shekelach HaChom B'mayim. Now, Makom Kasha on Shmuel, that we see in one place Shmuel says you need pas echad, and the other case we said you need 2 pasim. So it's a contradiction in Shmuel. So Kiyos Rav Papa Rav Rav Yeshua Beirav Pershua, that Shmuel had like this: Meruach achas ba'arba. If you have a board that's 4 tfachim wide, that's enough. Now, if you don't have a board 4, and you want to do it on both sides, I'm just looking if we haven't gotten to that. Yeah, we paskin. We need a pas arba tefachim on one side, or a kosher on either side. So we do paskin like that. Amrav Papa, kashali akashali. If you wanted to have a problem with Shmuel, this is the problem I had. The Amalei Shmuel Rav Chananya Bar Shila, Atloi Taviduv Eloi Barav Doifna B'Shnei Pasim. That Shmuel instructed to correct such a chotzer, you need either to fill up the majority of the wall. Let's say there's a wall missing, so you got to put a board to make up 51% of it. Oh, with 2 pasim. Freak the Gemara Lamali Roiv Doifin. Why do I need the pas? Our boss. What's wrong with just putting up a board of 4 tefachim? Why do I have to have it that it's the majority? So because we're talking about the only reason it works by 4 tefachim. We're talking about the case where the whole wall was 7 tefachim. So by putting a board of 4, it's occupying more than 50%. So Lamali Arba, why would you need 4? It means if you have a opening of 7 and you already put a board of 3 in a little bit, so the opening is going to be less than 4. That certainly should work. Right? Because remember we learned previously tonight that if you have an opening of a mavui that's less than 4 tefachim, you don't need any lechi or koira. So again, if you have the chotzer has got a 7 tefachim opening, and you put a board of 3 in a little bit, so the rest of the opening is less than 4. If it's less than 4, why should it be worse than a mavui? If an entrance to a mavui doesn't need anything and you can carry in it, this chotzer shouldn't need anything either once you put a board of 3 in a mashut. So that's the Gemara's question. Why, in that case, did you need a board of 4? 3 in a little bit would be enough. Good kasha. Iboy say kan b'chotzer, kan b'mavui, ein chanami. The heter of less than 4 by a mavui does not exist by a chotzer. By mavui, you don't need a correction. By a chotzer, needs a correction. Or by saying the Rav Achli gufa tanoi, or bichlal. What Rav Achli wants to say is bichlal machlokes tanoi. Okay, the interesting sugya there. Okay, ton rabbanon l'shon yam anichnas l'chotzer. You have this ocean or river, body of water that's coming into the chotzer. And b'malan emenu b'Shabbos, you can't take your bucket and take water from it on Shabbos. Ela im ken yesh lo mechitza gavoa sor tefachim. Has to have a wall, sort of, I guess, built over it of at least 10 tefachim. So it creates a wall. Then the water that is within your Rosh Hashanah, then everything is Rosh Hashanah, is not a problem. We're talking about a case where the opening of the side wall that's opening up to the water was bigger than 10 amas. Avalasora, if it's less than 10 amas, so that's a regular opening. Ain't tzarech klum, you already have side mechitzas. So because remember, it's not like the whole wall is gone. You got some wall, and then there's 10 amas, like a doorway, or an opening, like between your living room and your dining room, like a big opening.
Hello.
Yes.
Here's what it looks like.
Can you bring it a little closer? Yeah. So Hanami. So there's You have a chutzner with 4 walls, and that opening is 10 amas or less.
Less than it has to be less than 10 amas.
Yes, 10 amas or less. 10 amas or less. That's when it says about, and then ain sarach klum, because you have those at the side. The walls to the side of the opening is considered a wall. Your chutzner is still a good chutzner. Any water that comes inside, you can draw from. Now, in the case where we said you could not draw, for example, if the opening was more than 10, right? So you could not drag water from the body of water. But but you could carry that chutzner. Now the Gemara, at least that's how the Gemara wants to be medayek here. When it says that you can't fill water, fine, you can't fill water, but you could carry in the chutzner. But the Gemara is now asking on that. How could you carry in the chutzner? You've got a wide opening of that chutzner to an area that it's usher to carry to. So how could you carry without a loklum? There are, I guess, pieces of the wall that are underneath the water, or there are side walls that have not been, it's not a complete wide opening of the chutzner to the water, like Walter's picture. There were side walls up until that opening. So that would maintain it as a chutzner still, and allow you to carry within the chutzner. Rav Yehuda. Mavui shelo nishtatfu bo. So let's again remember the structure of a mavui is a rectangular space. It can't be square. The length has to be more than the width. And then you have chatzeros emptying into the mavui and multiple houses in each chatzer. Now, in order to carry from the chatzer to the mavui, you have to do something. You have to do a shituf mavuos. You have to do, all the people in the chatzers and the batim have to come together and get, just like if you have multiple houses in one chatzer, like an apartment house. You have 3 different houses that open up into one central courtyard. The din is, each individual, even though the chatzer is Rosh Hashanah, and each house is Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to carry from one house into the chatzer unless all 3 houses, each one contributed $1. They bought a loaf of bread, Erev Shabbos. They put that loaf of bread in one of the houses. We now have a fiction that the 3 houses really belong to one person. It's only one balabayas, and therefore it's all one bias opening up into the chutzner. That's why we can carry from each individual house into the chutzner. Same thing if you live in an apartment building with 20 apartments opening up into a central lobby. You can't carry from your apartment into the lobby unless let's say they're all Jews, unless all 20 join into a Eruv Chatzeros. Now, here we're talking about a Shituf Mavuos. Here we're saying all the Chatzeros that are opening up into the Mavli also have to do a purchase. Then you can carry from the Chatzeros into the Mavli. It becomes like one Balabai. So the Gemara gives us a case. Mavli Shalom Nishtatfu bo. You have a Mavli where the people in the Chatzeros that are opening up into the Mavli did not make a Shituf Mavuos. But they hung a lechi on the opening of the Mavui to the Rosh Hashanah. Now, even though the people in the Chatzers cannot carry from the Chatzer to the Mavui, because they didn't make a sheet of Mavuos, this lechi becomes a Rishus HaYachid Midoraisa. This Mavui becomes a Rishus HaYachid Midoraisa. And therefore, if somebody is standing Rishus HaRabbi and throws it into that Mavui, he's Chayav Achatis. Now, obviously, the Lechi made a Mechitza, according to this opinion, because it's a complete Rishus HaYachid. It looks like it closed it off. And that's why regardless of the fact that the people can't carry from the chutzner to the mavui, it's created a four-sided rishus, and you're chayiv. However, ichshir b'koira, if they put a crossbeam on top, then if you threw from rishus harabim into the mavui, then you're potter. Because obviously this opinion is holding that a koira is not mishum mechitza, but just a hecker, and therefore it doesn't close off the mavui sufficiently to make it a rishus hayachid. Maski for Rav Sheshes, here the whole svara was there was no shituf mavus. Taima de lo nishtatfu bo. Ha nishtatfu bo. So what are you going to tell me? That if they made a shituf mavus, that afilu hechzer b'kor nami chayiv, that if you put a crossbeam, the person was just arriving who throws a ball into the mav, he's going to be chayiv. What does to make a difference whether the people have a right to carry from the chutzner into the mavui or not? Buying the loaf and putting it somewhere does not change the status that this mav is rishus hayachid or not. Latanya, chatzer shel rabim. If you have a chutzner that's opening up directly into rishus harabim, or many homes open up into a chutzner, and therefore the bnei batim are asering on each other; they can't carry into the chutzner. Rashi says, "Shein yachol lahotzi min habatim lechutzner below eruv. They shabayis rishus miuchedes lo, the chutzner rishus chaver moishel bo, the nimtza motzim rishus l'rishus, v'rabbanon gozer. Rabbanon made gzeir shelo lahotzi rishus hayach rishus hayachid gzeir del moasi lafukim rishus hayachid rishus harabim." The whole reason for making a gzeira that you can't carry from one rishus hayachid to another rishus hayachid, because you have multiple potential owners opening up into the same rishus hayachid, is because you're going to be confused. If you're allowed to do that, you'll carry from rishus hayachid to rishus harabim. Avol b'chotzer mutar l'taltel bo. That means, let's say, items that are in the chutzner, Rashi means. Items that started off Erev Shabbos in the chutzner. It means, if you don't make an Erev Chatzers, you can't carry from a house into the chutzner. But if the items were in the chutzner, you can carry, nothing, the Erev doesn't change the status of the chutzner to be a not Rishus HaYachid. You're allowed to carry that Rishus HaYachid if the items were in the chutzner to begin with. So or let's say you have a through and through mavui, not a three-walled mavui, only a two-walled mavui, an alley. So bein irvu, vein lo irvu, hazark l'toichem chayiv. So whether there's an eruv, whether there's not an eruv, if you throw into a chatzir, or even if you throw into a mavui she'ena mefulish. Now, here it seems, according to this man de Omar, a mavui she'ena mefulish only has two walls, yet it still establishes lechora rishus hayachid midaraisa. So what are you telling me in this case of Rav Yehuda that mavui shalon nishtadvu bo? Whether you have a shituf or not a shituf, it should be the same thing. So clearly not like Rav Yehuda. So you got to change what we're quoting Rav Yehuda is saying. On Rav Yehuda, mavui she'ena roy l'shituf. It's not that there was no shituf. A mavui that is not capable of shituf, for example, a through and through mavui. Only a three-sided mavui can you make a shituf. You can't make a shituf with a through and through mavui. However, hechshiru b'lechi, if you put a lechi on a mavui she'ena mefulish, even only on one side, so that lechi is considered like a wall, and it's a third wall. And for rishus hayachid midaraisa, you only need three walls, and therefore azark l'toichem chayiv. If you're standing rishus harabim, you threw into that mavui mefulish that you just put a lechi on and created a third wall, you're chayiv. However, Echshir b'koire, that's the case. If you put a crossbeam across the third side and the other side is open, hazar l'toichoi potter, because a koire is not a mechitza. Al miksaver lechi mishum mechitza, but the koire mishum heker. A lechi creates sort of a fictional wall. A koira is only to grab your eye to make you remember, oh, here comes Rosh Hashanah, I better stop. Rabba agrees. Lechi mishum mechitza, v'kor mishum heker. However, Rava Amar echad zev mishum heker. Rava says that no, both a lechi and a koira is not a din of a mechitza. It's only mishum heker. L'chora, according to Rava, that would be a big nafkamina. That if you had a mavui mefulish, and you put a lechi on one side, and you threw into it, you would not be chai. You'd be potter as well, because you didn't create a third wall. Therefore, it would not be Rosh Hashanah midoraisa. I just want to read the Rambam. Mavui sosum. You have a closed mavui, a three-sided mavui. Shechshir b'koira, that you put a koira. You're allowed to carry in such a mavui. Afshemut l'tal boy hazarik el toicha mishus harabim potter. The koira does not close it off. It's only mishum heker. And therefore, if you throw a ball for mishus harabim into it, you'd be potter. However, mechshir b'lechi chayiv. But if you threw it, if it had a lechi, it would be mishum mechitza, and you'd be chayiv. Kafi digvreg marshal lechi mishum mechitza v'kor mishum heker. We don't paskin like Rava. We paskin against Rava that a lechi creates a mechitza, according to Rambam. It says kiven shel Rambam ha'isakan girsa acheres. Because he learned that you need full 4 mechitzos, and here you wouldn't have, because you only have 3, and then the lechi, the koire is only a heker. However, the Ravid sover sholosh mechitzos sein rishusayach min haTorah, and therefore, according to the Ravid, you would be chayiv. And the Gemara here is talking about a mavim of foolish, like we've been learning the way Rashi is learning, and that's why you're only chayiv once you have 3. So Rava Amar echad zev mishum heker. Eisver of Yaakov bar Rava. So we ask Kasha on Rava. Azarik lemavoi. If you throw into a mavoi, now we don't know what kind of mavoi, whether it's a mafulish or not. It says yesh lo lechi chayiv. That's a lechi or chayiv. Ein lo lechi potter. Without a lechi, it's potter. So you see, though, let's say whatever kind of mavui it is, that a lechi closes it off. Not like what Rava says that the lechi is only mishum heker. So hachi kamer eino tzarich ela lechi. What he meant to say is it only needs a lechi to fix it, and therefore azark l'toich chayiv. But lechi b'dover acher. If you have a mavui mafulish, through and through mavui, and you built it sursa pesach on one side, and a lechi on the other side, then you don't have a full rishus hayachid, and if you threw from rishus harabim into there, you'd be potter. Let's say you had Olympic Boulevard, which let's say for our purposes is considered a rishus harabim. And we know between, for example, Robertson and La Cienega, there are houses across the street from each other. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you make a lechi on one side and a lechi on the other side, and you've created like a 4 walls. You can carry from one house to the other. You can't make an air for Rosh Hashanah that way. But we see that a lechi is treated like a full mechitza. Whereas there's no riot from there, because Hasan Ksav Rabbi Yehuda shtei mechitzas deraisa. We see there's a 3-way machloikes. We brought in when we saw the psak halacha, The Rambam holds you need Daled Mechitzas for a Yachid Deraisa. The Ravid holds you only need Gimel. And the Rabbi Yehuda holds you only need 2. And therefore, you can carry from one side to another. The Lechis are just Mishum Heker. On Rabbi Yehuda Mavisha Arka Karachvo. Eno Niter Belechi. Oh. Hello?
Yes.
No. I can't. We have a problem. I can't learn tomorrow at 7 because I have surgery at 7:30. So we'll have to learn in the evening. So what did we do? 4:30?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so we'll learn 4:30 tomorrow.
All right.
Okay, shkoyach.
No, I'm not finished.
Okay.
No, I'm not finished. I want to finish the block. I was just
That's how good you follow.
I thought you were ready to go.
No,
That's
but
how
I
good
looked
you're
up.
following, Walter.
No, I looked up and I saw that we had lost some people, so I want to make sure that we get it. That I wanted to.
I'll send a
Who did you
message.
lose? We're still
What?
here, Ernie. We're here with you.
Good. Amrid Amarav Mavui Sha'arka Karachmo. A mavui that the length and the width is like a square. Eino net niter belechi mashu. Lechi. It's not like a shita, like a mavui. This is a chotzer, and therefore it needs more. You need the pasar ball, like we said. You need a board that's 4 tfachim. Also, a mavui is corrected by a crossbeam on top that's a tefach wide. That won't work. You need at least a board that's 4 tfachim if it's square. That we see how straight the halachas of the zakenim were. Means, given the arka karachbo, you're describing a mavui whose length is the same as its width. How about a chotzer? So you're describing the dimensions of a chotzer. A chotzer in the terms a chotzer that's opening into an area that normally is prohibited to carry from a chotzer to that thing. So you can only carry the chotzer if it's got pas arba. It's not fixed with a lechi or a kol. If you want to know if I have a problem with this, hakashali. I'll tell you, why don't we say the lechi is like a pas, and it should matter it? For example, a chotzer who's got an opening into something, it also works with a pas. Why does it have to be a certain dimension? However, Ishtamit say he forgot Hadam Ravasim Rav Yechnon. Pas echotzer tzrichel sheben arba. You can't just have a pas mashu. We said already before that a board needs it got to be 4 tefachim. And on Rav Nachman Naktina, we have in our hands what kind of mavui is corrected with just a lechi or a kara? Kol she'orko yoser al rach. It's got to be a rectangle. Its length has to be longer than its width. What else? Batim v'chatzeres psuchim l'sochel. You need to have multiple houses and multiple chatzers opening into the mavli. Otherwise, it's not halachically treated like a mavli. Now, a zewi chatzer shein test b'lech v'koyel b'pasar bo. What are the criteria for a chatzer that a lech and a koyre are not sufficient to correct it, but it needs a 4 tefach board? Kol shemirubas, if it's square. Freit the Gemara mirubas in agula lo? I mean, what do you mean? What if you have the Lincoln Square Synagogue, which is in the round? I mean, what? Why should it be square? A round is not reshus hayachid. So achikam arko yisrael rachbo. If its length is greater than its width, it's a rectangle. Avalei mavui. Umavui b'lechi v'korasagi. A mavui only needs a lechi or a koyre. Now the ilo, Means if it doesn't meet the criteria of the length greater than the width, then it's a chutzner. And here, it doesn't say it's square. It could be a circle. Now, comma. How much more length than width does it have to meet? Is it any amount? So there was one opinion that said that the length had to be double the width. No, as long as it's 50.0001%, means as long as it's a little longer than it is wider. We paskin like Rav Nachman, that as long as the length is greater, doesn't have to be double, but you need batim and chatzeros opening up into it. Then it'll have a heter lechi or koira. Anything else needs pasar ba, it's considered like a chutzer, and it would need pasar ba to correct it. Okay, so we will learn Mirza Hashem tomorrow. Tomorrow, Yud Gimel at 4:30.